Don't panic. Don't panic. How we fear. Chapter 1. Courage is knowing what not to fear. Plato. Don't panic. As the cold water rushed in, I gasped for one final breath before I was completely submerged. I remember the whole cockpit tipping over, the sinking sensation in my stomach, my body straining against the harness strapping me to my seat before I hit the water sideways. My body lit up with adrenaline, ready to panic. And then everything went quiet. I unclenched my hands and took a mental pause. Panicking would only make it harder to think, wasting valuable seconds I didn't have. Blackness obscured my vision. There was no way to see my way to safety. If I was going to get through this, I knew I would have to feel my way out. I reached down for the release on the seatbelt harness to my left. Or was it my right? Was I completely upside down now? I had to be. I had to be. I had lost my bearings and couldn't find a reference point. Don't panic. Find the latch. Pull to release. Swim to safety. I repeated these words as I fumbled in the dark. Damn it, where the hell was that release? My fingers finally grasped hold of the U-shaped harness lever, yanking it to the open position. As the 2-inch nylon strap slowly loosened around me, I wiggled free and pulled myself through the cockpit door. I knew I had to swim clear of the cabin before making my way to the surface. My lungs were burning now, my heart pounding. A few more seconds and I would be free. I finally kicked hard and forced myself upward. As I broke through the water's surface, I grasped for my first breath of air in what seemed like an eternity. Good job, Pomparas. You didn't drown, shouted the Secret Service instructor. Now get out of the pool. Next! The academy training scenario for the day was a simulated helicopter crash in the Olympic-sized training pool. Each recruit was first blindfolded, then strapped into the seat of a mock helicopter cockpit. The cockpit was then flipped upside down, submerging the agent, who then had to release themselves from the safety harness and swim through an underwater maze before surfacing. The training was designed to teach us how to survive should we ever find ourselves in that exact situation. But the simulation wasn't just a what if scenario. It became part of our training after a Secret Service agent died in a real life helicopter crash in May 26, 1973. That evening, 25-year-old Special Agent Clifford Dietrich, along with six other agents and three Army crew members, were flying from Key Biscayne, Florida, to the Grand Cay Islands in the Bahamas for their overnight presidential protection assignment for President Nixon. Shortly before landing, the twin-engine Sikorsky VH-3A helicopter crashed into the Atlantic Ocean. Although the aircraft initially remained afloat, it soon capsized, causing the cabin to quickly fill with water. While the other passengers climbed to safety on top of the overturned helicopter, Agent Dietrich never made it out. When his body was recovered, he was found still strapped into his safety harness. According to the medical examiner, Agent Dietrich's cause of death was asphyxia due to drowning. Our training instructor also told us that both of the agent's thumbs were broken. That meant Agent Dietrich had been alive and conscious when the helicopter hit the water, but ultimately drowned because he was unable to free himself from the seatbelt. Under stress, the agent would have reverted to what he knew about seatbelts. You push the release button with your thumbs like a car. But in a helicopter, the seatbelt mechanism is completely different, something the agent most likely couldn't remember in his final moments of panic. Even though I logically knew that I would probably die in a simulated helicopter crash, I wouldn't die in a simulated helicopter crash. There was no way around the instinctual onset of panic that flooded through me. My mind didn't care that this was a controlled exercise, which meant the fear of drowning was as real as anything I'd ever experienced. This exercise had nothing to do with physical strength or agility. While I was looking for a way to physically Houdini myself out of the contraption and not drown in the process, the simulation was teaching me how to maintain control of my emotions. Fear is a healthy and natural response to a perceived threat. On the other hand, panic causes us to lose control of our faculties. When we panic, we can't think, can't reason, can't process or plan. In other extreme circumstances, panic is likely to kill you faster than whatever it is you're afraid of. If you've ever experienced a panic attack, heart beating rapidly, hyperventilating, trembling, feeling like you're about to die, then you may understand what that agent felt as he hung upside down in the darkness underwater. One simple click and brief swim to his survival. He probably had minutes to assess his situation, form a plan, and escape to safety. But his panic made that impossible. Think about car accidents. Most people, when in a car accident, will take their hands off the wheel. At a time when logic says we most need to keep our hands at 10 and 2, panic causes us to take our hands away from the very thing that might save us. And where do people's hands go? Over their face. In the moments we most need our steering wheel and our vision, panic causes us to abandon both. This book is not about never feeling fear, it's about understanding fear and learning to control it. I want to help you master your fear so it doesn't turn to panic in a moment when you need to be able to think clearly. Fear can also be a limiting influence in our lives. It can prevent us from pursuing goals that we long to go after, from speaking openly in honesty, from being who we're truly meant to be. When we feel threatened or exposed, our fear can confine us and cut us off from the world. If that feels familiar, I'm going to help you change your relationship to fear. I'm going to show you how to get to know your fear, trust your instincts, and make choices that will keep you safe and strong. We are born with two kinds of fears hardwired into our system for survival. Two fears that scientists call innate: the fear of falling and the fear of loud sounds. Most of us have had a dream where we're falling and then startle awake. This fear of falling has been with us since birth. Newborns are quickly wrapped in a blanket because they can't immediately distinguish where their body ends and the world begins, which causes them to constantly jerk as if they're falling, a fear that eventually diminishes once their depth perception develops. Beyond their startle reflexes, studies show that infants refuse to crawl over a platform made of clear plexiglass even when their mothers are at the other end calling to them. They will stop at the edge and cry rather than risk going over the visual cliff. Their innate fear of falling is strong enough to override even that powerful bond between mother and child. Loud noises are the other stimulus that humans innately equate with danger. When we hear a loud noise, our acoustic startle reflex kicks in and our bodies instantly react. That's why we jump when a car backfires, why children cry at fireworks shows, and why we immediately drop to the ground when we hear anything that sounds like a gunshot. Beyond the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises, all other fears are learned fears. These are the fears that we inherit from our parents or acquire while growing up. If your mother is afraid of dogs, chances are you're going to grow up being afraid of dogs as well. Learned fears come from everywhere: our family, our friends, our culture, the news we watch, the harm we witnessed or experienced. We're taught to be afraid of failing or afraid of trying at all. There's no limit to the fears we can accumulate in our lifetime. Every generation seems to grow up with some type of societal fear. Today we fear radicalization, whether it's from gangs or radical religious groups, and its effects on our cities through terrorism, stabbings, and mass shootings. At a 2018 Pew Research Center study found that more than 50% of teenagers in the US were concerned that a shooting would happen in their school, with 25% of them being very worried. This fear persists despite the statistical improbability of any one student becoming a school shooting victim. With more than 50 million American youths attending public K through 12 schools for roughly 180 days of the year, the chance of being killed by a school shooter is about 1 in 614 million. By contrast, the likelihood of being struck by lightning in any one year is 1 in 1.2 million. Highlighting this mathematical implausibility, however, usually won't diminish the worry of students or their parents any more than it would diminish the fear of being attacked and killed by a shark, 1 in 3.7 million, or being in an airplane crash, 1 in 5.4 million. The debilitating nature of any fear especially unlikely ones, can drastically limit our ability to simply enjoy life. These fears can make some people too afraid to board a plane or swim in the ocean. Perhaps those people would be willing to drive to the beach, so long as they don't wade into the water past their knees or take a long road trip rather than take the risk of flying. They might choose these deceptively safer options, despite the fact that there is a far greater chance of being injured in a car crash than a shark attack or a plane crash. In fact, there is a 1 in 102 chance that you could be killed in a car accident in a given year. 1 in 102. So, why aren't people more afraid of dangers with a high statistical probability like car accidents? Why do we become so preoccupied with threats that have an incredibly low chance of ever occurring? Our fears have to do with several things, the first of which is the sensationalizing nature of the incidents by the media. When things that rarely happen, they become newsworthy. You're more likely to see and thus remember the social media post or evening news story about the victim of an unlikely tragedy, a surfer attacked by a great white shark off the coast of California, than you are about the two-vehicle accident that sent one driver to the hospital, something so common it likely won't even make the news. Exposure to those kinds of stories make those unlikely threats feel more real to us, and that fear overrides our ability to logically assess the probability of those things actually happening. Additionally, we are genetically predisposed to avoid things that can cause instant death, a big fish with white teeth, a thousand-volt bolt of lightning, or falling out of the sky. My intent here is not to make you more afraid of driving, but to get you to reflect on those things that you are most fearful of, to assess why you're afraid of them and look at them logically rather than enduring a clouded sense of dread amplified by sensationalized stories. When I was 16, what fear looks like. When I was 16, my family and I moved from Long Island City into a better neighborhood in Queens. Although crime in that new part of New York wasn't non-existent, it wasn't nearly as bad as where we came from. Because money was always tight, my little brother Theodoros and I helped our parents clean office buildings on the weekends after they each finished their day jobs. One Sunday night after finishing early, my mom and I drove back to our house while my father and brother stayed a few minutes longer to lock up. When we pulled into our driveway, I noticed the vertical blinds in the living room were open and the lights were on. "Why are the lights on?" I asked my mom. "And the blinds open?" She looked confused. "I don't know. We always close them." We didn't completely register that something was amiss until my mom unlocked the front door and we walked in. And that's when I saw him, a man running through our house toward the side entrance. My mom immediately froze, literally went motionless, as if her feet were cemented into the floor. I, on the other hand, didn't hesitate. I charged inside. "No!" my mom screamed. "Stop!" But she wasn't yelling at the intruder, she was yelling at me. I was already running after him. When I got to the side door, I saw him leap over the neighbor's fence and into the black of the night, gone. "Maybe there are others still here," I shouted back to her and began checking every room in the house. "No," my mom pleaded. Just stop." She was terrified for me, but her cries somehow sounded far off in the distance. I was mad going on furious as I first cleared the basement and then worked my way back upstairs. I was going to protect my mom, protect our home no matter what. I may have been I may have only been a teenager, but God help whoever was still in this house. I didn't know how, but I was not going to let them get away until the police arrived and took them to jail. Now at this point in the story, you might be thinking, "Wow, you've got some balls." Or maybe, "Listen to your mother, you idiot. You're gonna get yourself killed." Regardless of what you think about my level of bravery or stupidity, I share this story with you for an entirely different reason. First, let's go back to the start of the story. We pulled up to the house together in the car and immediately knew something was wrong. Our sense of fear and uncertainty began to build. When we walked inside, we saw a man running through our house. Fear built faster alongside the slightly delayed recognition that we were being burglarized. Um, Now what happened? What did my mom do? What did I do? My mom froze in her tracks. I ran after the guy. Bravery? Hardly. My mom and I experienced the exact same exposure to a threat, yet we had two completely different reactions. These reactions are called our fight, flight, and freeze responses, also known as the F3 response. My mom went into freeze mode, whereas I went into fight mode, and you could argue that the intruder I was chasing was in flight mode. Researchers say our fight, fright, and freeze uh, act, response activates before we're even aware of it as a way of assessing danger. It's as if a threat we think we can overpower. It's If it's a threat we think we can overpower, we go into fight mode. If it's a threat we think we can outrun, we go into flight mode. If it's a threat where we think we can do neither, we freeze. People may have a different response to the same stimuli, as my mother and I did, but no matter what your particular response to fear may be, the most important thing is to know and understand it so you can control it. Fight, flight, or freeze. F3 is your body's way of arming itself to help protect you. It is your physiological response to help you deal with the situation at hand. It's you, but a heightened version of you, a more aware and alert version. Your heartbeat increases so as you pump more blood throughout your body, which will make it easier to punch someone or run away. Uh, your heartbeat increases so as to pump more blood throughout your body, or you run away. So fight or flight. For people like myself who naturally go into fight mode when faced with a threat, our natural instinct is to immediately combat whatever is threatening us, whether or not it is safe to do so. If someone hits you, you hit back. If someone yells at you, you yell back. It's a response in which you retaliate with an aggressive behavior to protect yourself. You make the decision to take a defensive stance against the threat, whoever or whatever that may be. The flight response occurs when you feel threat is than you can handle. People who are predisposed to flight will run away from danger rather than run toward it. If someone threatens to attack them, they will get the hell out of there, which is often a very good idea. Similarly, if someone verbally confronts them, they will do all they can to avoid or remove themselves from the situation. The flight response is designed to protect you by getting you out of a volatile situation as quickly as humanly possible. Freeze occurs when you are so overwhelmed by a perceived threat that you can't respond. It is overstimulation that grips and immobilizes you. Have you ever seen someone go still with a deer in the headlights expression on their face? They're probably in a freeze response. Often when this happens, it can feel like your body is turning on you. You can't think, can't plan, can't act. All you can do is remain frozen in place and hope that the threat passes. Within the body are competing neurological pathways called the sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous systems, SNS and PSNS. Both the SNS and the PSNS are part of the autonomic nervous system, which means they can't be controlled voluntarily. The sympathetic or stress response is what gets activated when we're scared. In that moment, our body attempts to become superhuman by flooding itself with norepinephrine and adrenaline. The chemical dump is what makes our hands sweat, our hearts beat fast, our muscles tense, our pupils dilate, and our breathing increase. Everything we physically need to deal with a threat at that particular moment. Your vision becomes laser focused. Being sweaty makes you hard to hold on to, and your muscles are full of blood and oxygen, ready to respond to a danger at a moment's notice. The parasympathetic system, on the other hand, is what helps us calm down and relax and recover. It's what goes to work after we've eaten and what helps us fall asleep. Essentially, it does the opposite of the SNS in an effort to keep the body's constant effort to maintain homeostasis, a physical state where everything is balanced. Identify your fear response. You may come to find that you have a pattern when it comes to F3, a way you habitually respond to danger or conflict. The way I responded as a teenager to the intruder in our home was characteristic for me. My go-to response has always been fight. Even now, whenever I feel threatened, my immediate response is to go on the attack. My mother's F3 response in the above scenario was initially flight. But after I ran in, she couldn't leave me, so instead she froze. She was too overwhelmed and confused to know what to do. Her F3 response wouldn't allow her to follow me into the house because it sensed danger and was keenly aware that what I had done was completely stupid, which meant freeze was the only option. Yet over the years, my mother's natural pattern of dealing with conflict has usually been a flight response. It's important to know that no one F3 response is the correct response to a threat. There's no such thing. Our F3 response is simply what we're predisposed to, which can help us in some situations and hinder us in others. Knowing that I typically respond to a threat with fight mode means that I have to be careful because there are plenty of times when fighting my way out of a situation could be dangerous or dumb. Sometimes fleeing is by far the best thing you can do in a threatening situation. If I could go back and give my 16-year-old self some advice about how to respond to a home intruder, I would tell her to get the hell out of that house and help her mom find a safe place to call the police. At the same time, my mother's pattern isn't a prudent response to every situation either. She goes to great lengths to avoid conflict. If she needed to fight back, I'm not sure she would be able to. The idea here isn't to respond to every situation in one way, but to understand how you naturally respond. Before we try to learn how to manage our fear response, we must first identify our patterns. Understanding my personal F3 response allows me to exert control over myself, to identify what I'll do before it happens, and assess the tactical costs and benefits of that response. So, so take a moment to identify what camp you're in. If you don't know right away, make a list of three times when you felt threatened. What did you do? Did your response vary depending on the kind of situation you faced, or is your particular pattern very consistent across the board? Once you know your instinctive F3 response, you can begin to predict what you will most likely do and come up with ways to manage that response before a volatile situation arises. If, for instance, flight is your go to F3 response, the next time you feel the need to flee, take a moment to consider if that's the best way to handle it. Getting away is indeed the best thing you can do, or maybe staying put to assess the situation or fight back is actually a safer, or more practical option. Once you achieve a deeper understanding of yourself and your F3 response, you can create other options to choose from. You can give yourself more choices based on your ability to plan and strategize, rather than responding unconsciously to a threat. Chapters 3 through 8 will give you some great ideas as well. The more control you have over your F3 response, the better you'll be able to deal with difficult situations and thrive in the world. A fundamental lesson to becoming bulletproof.